All right, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick's on the Power. So I wanted to go through the list of qualified bodybuilders so far for the 2018 Mr. Olympia. Now, with less than 10 weeks to go, we pretty much have a pretty solid idea of who's going to be there, give or take a couple guys that are still trying to qualify on points. There's only a couple opportunities left for guys to qualify and get into the Mr. Olympia. So the list of qualified guys right now is going to give you a pretty good idea of who's going to be there and who the top guys are going to be. So we're going to give kind of a early prediction video and kind of some early expectations of who's going to be placing where based on this qualification list. So let's get started here. So there's going to be two lists that we're looking at here. Number one is going to be the guys that are already qualified. Number two is going to be the highest point standings. So if you win a show, you automatically qualify for the Olympia. And then if you do well at a show, you can accrue these points. So these point standings are organized by who has the most points and who is the closest to qualifying for the Mr. Olympia. They can maybe do a couple more shows and get in there. So qualified so far, obviously we have Phil Heath, who won last year's Olympia, automatically qualified. The whole top six is automatically qualified for the next year. So Big Ramy, William Bonac, Dexter Jackson, Sean Roden, Roelly Winklaar. There's your top six from last year. Then you have Brandon Curry, Cederick Mcmillian, Steve Kuklo, Nathan Diasha, Juan Morel, Charles Griffin, Michael Lockett, and Lucas Osadil, those two who just recently qualified. Michael Lockett by winning in Chicago at the Chicago Pro, and Lucas Osadil who won the Vancouver Pro very recently. And the three most likely guys that are probably going to get in on points, Josh Wade, Justin Luis Rodriguez, and Akeem Williams, all of which who have 10 or more points. We'll most likely see these guys at the Olympia. So I'll just give some very early predictions here based on what we've seen so far. Obviously, these are probably going to change as we get closer to the Olympia and we start to see more and more of what these guys are looking like closer and closer to the show. But based on what we've seen from these guys over the past year, how they've qualified, the caliber of shows that they've won, the improvements they've made on their physique, we can get a pretty good idea of how they're probably going to do at the Mr. Olympia if they're able to replicate the physiques they brought at these shows. So first I want to talk about guys that did not crack the top six last year that I think have a chance of cracking the top six this year. So the first guy I want to talk about is Nathan Diasha, who has had a phenomenal pro year this year, winning both the Cali Pro and, of course, the major title of winning the New York Pro, placing 7th at last year's Olympia. I think Nathan Diasha is a solid threat to that top six, and certainly a guy that I think could crack in there if he's able to replicate the physique that he brought at both the Cali and New York Pro, more specifically the Cali Pro, where he looked a lot better and a lot sharper. Looking at the top six from last year, I think he could be able to beat a guy like a Dexter Jackson even, who we don't know how Dexter's going to look because of his appearance at the 2018 Arnold Australia, where he had that bicep issue. Dexter could be a guy that's beaten down this year, and it could be a guy that we see slip in placings even more because, again, he's the oldest guy on that stage, and we could see him, so far the trend has been that his placings have been dropping. So we could see Dexter Jackson maybe dip out of that top six, and we could see a guy like Nathan Diasha crack in there, beating a guy like Dexter, or even beating a guy like Sean Roden, who hasn't been doing that well at the past couple Olympias. Now, the guy that I want to see move up the most, and that I think could move up the most, is the 2018 Arnold Classic Australia champion, Roelly Winklaar. Now, Roelly Winklaar brought, arguably the best physique he ever brought to the stage at that Arnold Australia. He looked phenomenal. Roelly Winklaar is really in a league of his own in terms of overall size. I mean, the guy is a freak. The only two issues with Roelly is, number one, the density in his back, and number two, the conditioning is sometimes a problem, although it wasn't a problem at the Arnold Australia. And if he's able to do that at the Olympia, I could see Roelly Winklaar moving up significantly at this year's Olympia. Now, Roelly is a guy, he placed 6th last year at the Olympia. And again, I mentioned his back. And I think when it comes down to Roelly versus Phil, a lot of people would want to see Roelly win the Mr. Olympia. A lot of people, have that in the back of their minds. But the problem that Roelly's going to run into is Phil Heath has such a complete back and such a thick, dense, detailed back development. I just really can't see Roelly beating Phil unless Phil is just, like a 75% shadow of himself. Because Roelly versus Phil could be very comparable from the front, from the sides. But when they turn around from the back, I think it's really game over in favor of Phil Heath. But you got to look at the top six from last year. You had Sean Roden in 5th, Dexter Jackson in 4th, William Bonac in 3rd, Big Ramy in 2nd. Could Roelly beat a Sean Roden? I think yes. Could Roelly beat a Dexter Jackson? Yes, he could, and yes, he did at the Arnold Australia. So he's already beaten Dexter. I think he could certainly beat Sean. So that could move Roelly up to a placing like 4th. So that could be 2 places up from last year. Could Roelly beat William Bonac? If William Bonac came in off, I think he could beat William Bonac. I think we could see Roelly Winklaar as high as top 3 at the 2018 Mr. Olympia. Now, Rowley versus a guy like Big Ramy, Rowley versus a guy like Phil Heath, that's going to be a lot tougher for Rowley to overcome. While it might be possible, it could be possible for him to beat Big Ramy and take second. I could see Rowley solidly in that top 3 at the 2018 Mr. Olympia. So I'm going to go ahead and predict Rowley could be 4th or 3rd at the 2018 Mr. Olympia. So my prediction so far, I would have Sean Roden slipping to a placing like 7th. And a guy like Nathan Diasha, if he catches a guy like Sean slipping, Sean was slipping last year. If he catches Sean slipping this year, I could see Sean slipping out of that top 6, Nathan slipping in. Then you could have Dexter dropping down from 4th to 5th. So you have Nathan in 6th, Dexter in 5th. I really would like to see Rowley in that top 3, but realistically, I think Rowley is probably going to be in that 4th place spot at the 2018 Mr. Olympia. And honestly, in all likelihood, I think the same top 3 from last year is going to be the top 3 this year of William Bonac, Big Ramy, and Phil Heath. William Bonac just came off that Arnold Classic win, which was massive. I mean, the Arnold Classic is the 2nd biggest show in bodybuilding. I mean, that is a massive just momentum boost for William Bonac coming into this Olympia. And to see him not place in the top 3 after that amazing showing he had this year, I just don't foresee. I can't see it happening. And based on the guest posings that we've seen of Bonac so far, he looks phenomenal at 10 weeks out. And Big Ramy is Big Ramy, man. I think he solidified his spot as being a top 3 Olympian with the size and decent enough conditioning to get into that top 3. And Phil Heath, of course, 7-time Mr. Olympia. I don't think you're going to see Phil outside of that top 3, no matter what happens. Now, there are some wild cards that I want to talk about here, and the biggest wild card of all would be Kai Green and the potential that he gets a special invitation. Now, it's important to realize Kai Green is not qualified for this year's Olympia. He has not competed to qualify this year. He would have to get a special invitation to compete. He's been offered a special invitation in the past and turned it down. So, the chances of him getting another one aren't really the greatest. He could get another special invitation. I would love to see him compete. But it's important to remember he has not qualified, and he has not yet been issued that special invitation. But Kai Green could show up and throw a total wrench in that top 6. Now, another wild card you have is Cederick Mcmillian, obviously one of the biggest people's champions of all time. He's obviously one of the most favorite, beloved by the fans. He won the Arnold Classic last year in 2017. But a couple weeks ago, maybe it was a month ago now, at the Toronto Pro, Cedric had a very disappointing showing there, taking the 3rd place spot in Toronto. And that really left a lot of people wondering, is Cedric going to even be a threat at this year's Mr. Olympia? Now, last year, Cedric placed 10th. A very disappointing placing for Cedric. And a lot of people wonder, is it going to be the same case this year? Based on the trend, I would have to say that I don't think Cedric's going to be in the top 6 this year. I would love to see him crack in there, but just based on the direction his physique's been going, I just can't see it happening. Now, as far as guys cracking in that top 10 that weren't there last year, I would really love to see Steve Kuklo crack in that top 10. He brought a package to the Indy Pro, which I was at and I saw in person, where he looked phenomenal. His conditioning was 100% on point. He also competed in the Arnold Classic, where he had really good conditioning as well. I think Steve Kuklo is a guy that's going to be cracking in that top 10 this year that a lot of people don't expect to see in that top 10, as well as a guy like Charles Griffin. Charles Griffin, who won the Muscle Mayhem show, and he took 2nd to Steve Kuklo at that Indy Pro. I mean, Charles Griffin has an incredible physique, and I think this guy is going to be a guy to watch out for in that top 10 as well. Keep in mind, outside of the top 10 last year, you had Josh Lenardowitz, Brandon Curry, and Nathan Diasha, as well as Cedric taking 10th. I'm pretty sure Josh isn't doing the Olympia. He's not qualified. I don't think he's going to try to qualify. So that's one place that's open in the top 10 that wasn't open last year. So I think for sure a guy like Steve Kuklo or a guy like Charles Griffin could take Josh's spot in 9th, or could even take Cedric's spot in 10th if Cedric doesn't come in at 100%. So those are my preliminary predictions for the 2018 Mr. Olympia. I think in all likelihood we're going to see Phil repeat here. But again, as we get closer to the show, I'm going to give out another set of predictions as we get closer, and we've seen more updates of all these guys and how they're looking maybe 2 or 3 weeks out. So let me know what you guys think How would you place the 2018 Mr. Olympia based on what you've seen so far? Let me know in the comment section below, and please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Nick Strength and Power, signing out.